Okay, Jack, let's start playing the game. A, Atlanta.
A, Atlanta. B, Baltimore.
C, Calgary. Oh, wait, no, I
No,
messed it up already.
I don't get why this is so hard. Hugh was right. You just have to repeat everything said before and add one.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a memory game. I thought it was more of a city knowledge game. But welcome to Survivor Analytics. I'm the true expert. I'm Clyde. I'm here with the voice of the people, Jack. We will be talking about episode 7 of Survivor 46. How's it going with you, Jack?
What's up, party people? This was a interesting episode. I said to somebody that I enjoyed it more as a podcaster than as a viewer. I enjoyed it as an episode to talk about more than an episode to watch.
Okay.
Is that weird?
Well, why is that the case?
The challenge was mediocre and super early. The deliberations dragged on way too long. And when there's a vote that's fairly obvious, right? Production really likes to set up some uncertainty and imply some uncertainty. And I don't think they had enough to work with because the votes were so obvious here. And so overall, any episode where I'm already writing stuff down about the challenge on page 1, I'm not going to be crazy about because it means there's not a lot of substance before the challenge.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your take on this being a better podcast episode. I watched this with friend of the show, Alexis, this past week. And I think having someone else on the couch to talk through all of the potential decisions made it way more fun. I think if I was watching this on my own, I would have been kind of bored at points. I saw this week as a building block episode where we still have some of these fake contenders on the beach. Like, no one really thought Tim was going to win. I never bought into the soda winning stock. And we still have a couple contestants on the cast like that. We have a Liz. We have a Q, in my opinion. You might disagree with me on that due to his Meat Boy status. So we're still like trimming the fat of the season to get to the real contenders of the group. But as much as I hate the double tribal council, it expedites that process to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I think the interesting thing here is after this episode is when the real game begins, in a lot of sense. The end game begins after this double vote, because next week will be Final 10, and all 10 people, well, there will be some twist where somebody loses a vote, but all 10 people will be sitting at the same tribal council. Somebody will be Soda will be sitting in the jury, right? We have a mayor of Ponderosa. The white smoke is up. Ponderosa has a new leader. And that's when things get real. Trimming the fat is exactly what this was. It could have been a lot more, I think. Both votes, and we'll get into it when we get into it, had an interesting parallel in that the safer option for everybody went home in both iterations. And the bigger threat that was potentially on the chopping block stayed.
And in both situations, the under-edited player went home compared to the contestant that we know more about. So even though we say trimming the fat, it's partially a symptom of the edit. Like, if they gave more time to Soda and Tim, I would have felt more uneasy during tribal council in terms of who was going home. But I'm all set to hop into it if you are.
Yeah, to jump in, we start with, well, we now know the merged tribe's name.
Yeah, what is it?
Did you note this? Nui Nui. N-U-I, N-U-I.
Okay, do we have any reasoning why that's the name?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, it just says Nui Nui when we return to camp after the mergatory vote. And we get a lot of night vision in this episode. We probably spend the first 10 minutes of the episode in night vision. I have everything until the challenge as happening the night of the mergatory vote. Well, there's two big things to note before the challenge. Venus decides to accuse Soda of putting her name down.
A wild accusation.
Listen, what was it she said last week? I have power in this game, and if you don't believe it, you'll see. Like, she's trying to play a different game. She's trying to play Clue and just make accusations.
The chances of her landing that are so slim, and she fully believes that Soda is the person that voted against her. Like, I don't see that Venus is controlling the game, and even when you put on the night vision, I can't see that. I think she's equally oblivious both during the night and the day. And at first, I was really happy with Charlie as he was creating even more tension amidst the Nami group as Soda and Venus go off to the well and argue about that lone vote. And then he makes his biggest mistake of the entire season up until this point in fessing up to Venus and admitting that he was the one that voted against her. So, like, what do you think was Charlie's rationale here?
Oh, I know exactly what it was. It was Vibe Tribe morality making it into Merge Tribe dynamics. This is something where in Sega, if he'd had to write a name down and he wrote down the wrong name, he would come clean and they'd all go, "That does not rock, dude, but it's all right." And they'd hug, and then they'd go dig up a tree, and they'd teach Mariah how to jump, right? But in the Merge Tribe, in Nui Nui, I'm not going to bother with that. In the Merge Tribe, that just doesn't work. Like, you're just showing a flaw. You're showing that you were ignorant for no reason other than to clear the air around a camp that is only going to get more tense. There's no point in establishing a good vibe and showing your vulnerability that I can see, right?
Yeah, I don't really understand Charlie's reasoning here. It creates concern for me in the long run of the game, where I see Charlie and Maria as one of the tightest pairs in the entire game right now.
Oh, yeah.
And as it stands, I think it's more likely that Maria outplays Charlie than vice versa, because I don't see a world where Charlie is willing to flip against Maria and keep all of it a secret. Like, he couldn't even keep this vote a secret against Venus, who he barely knows. They probably have been on the same beach for not even a full 2-3 days at this point. I think Charlie is your loyal soldier, and I hope he can build some more strategic acumen and build that dog to flip on someone with no remorse. But I don't think it's really likely.
I don't see it. Like, I do not see it. The amount of reliance he has on Maria at the end of this episode, as things are getting tense, he says, "Look, I'm going to do whatever she says. She's the only one I can trust. Whatever name she gives me is the name I'm going with." Like, he is willing to let her take the lead, and maybe that will change, right? But we haven't gotten any indication that that will happen yet.
It's a shame because he's the center of the modern Sega tribe, where there's only 3 Sega players left. It's him, Ben, and Maria. He's the connector between those two. So he's positioned himself well in the game. It's just a matter of what he does with that positioning.
Yeah, but speaking of Ben, we've got an animal shot.
Oh, I missed this one. Okay.
We get an animal shot of a bat sleeping. There are a lot of bat animal shots in this episode. I'm not going to keep bringing them up. This is the only one I'm going to bring up, but there are...
Do they all represent Ben or just this one?
No. I think there's just a ton of bats. Like, it's everybody gets a bat shot. It's every transitional nature shot, I think, is bats either awake or flying or sleeping. But this one, in night vision, is a bat sleeping, and the cameras are thankfully rolling. I don't know why they're rolling, to be honest with you. And Ben starts having a panic attack, kind of wakes up from a dream into a panic attack, and we have this sequence where Kenzie helps him through it, right? And she says, "Look, I'm not going to be cold-hearted. This is a human thing. It's not just a game. I'm going to help him through this," right? Very touching. Is there any tactical benefit to this? Obviously, it's a nice thing, right? And I think the nice facet of it is nobody is going to hold this against Ben, right? Do you see a Ben-Kenzie alliance going forward because of this?
I think there's legitimate potential there. It would be great for both of their games because right now, Ben's only true ally, as far as I know, is Charlie. You can say the same thing about Kenzie with her closest ally being Tiffany. Like, yes, Kenzie has the connection to Q, especially with the events later in the episode. That seems to be falling apart. So I like the idea of a Kenzie-Ben alliance. I wonder if the result of this episode changes if this saga doesn't play out. Because we had not seen their bond at all until this event. And at least from what I can tell in the edit, it seems like part of the reason why Ben eventually stays around is because of his social connection to Kenzie, which forms through this comforting act.
We really don't get to see as much of the deliberations between the Yanu members as I would like. We basically just get to see Q's outbursts, and that's it, right?
Yeah. I'll also note that this whole segment with Kenzie, like, starkly contrasts her treatment of Banu earlier in the season. Like, when Banu was breaking down on the Yanu camp, Kenzie had very little remorse for him, and she apologized to him more based out of strategy.
Yeah.
Whereas now it seems like she has that genuine connection with Ben. So it seems like the edit is presenting Kenzie in a more positive light. I'm putting Kenzie in the contenders going into the final 10. I think she's one of the most legit players left to win the game.
Well, and let me just throw out that there was a pathetic angle to Banu's
Okay.
issues, right? It was, just in that it was so constant that they got sick of it, right? Ben has a couple of emotional moments in this episode, both now and at Tribal. And both times he's really apologetic on like a logistical level. He's like, I'm sorry you're having to deal with this. When he tears up just barely and talks very kindly in Tribal and apologizes for going on too long, right? There's a lot more to Ben than a panic attack, and there wasn't much more to Banu than crying.
Okay.
And so I think that's the big difference there. And then we're in the challenge. That's all I've got before the challenge.
Only other thing I have before the challenge is that when Charlie admits to Venus that he voted against her, Q pulls him aside, and we get another Coach Q segment where he says, Charlie, what are you doing? You can't tell Venus that you voted against her. Charlie is fed up with Q. He says that in confessional, and he's not the only person that Q rubs the wrong way. And we'll talk about this more later, but do you think we're going towards a Q elimination in the next week or two?
I think we're definitely seeing a sharp turn in the presentation of Q, right? There was this whole buildup of the former athlete trying to get some glory, get a win. Yanu finally gets their one win. They make the merge. Woohoo. And now the sort of sinister side of that, right, of the alpha male mentality that he has is coming out. And I don't know if it's going to be a Q elimination or just if Kenzie and Tiff play their cards right, using Q's elimination as a springboard could be really powerful for them down the line. And I don't see any scenario where Q wins this game at this point.
Well, could he win if he makes it to the end? Like, I don't think he'll get to that point, but I see a world where Q wins if he sits in the final tribal because he's going to want to have say over every vote.
I mean, I see one permutation where that works out for him, and it's
Venus Liz.
Q Venus Liz.
Yep.
like it's Q and the guaranteed no vote finalists. Like, if either Venus or Liz make the final, they're not getting a vote. Anybody else left on the beach gets votes. I completely believe that. Everyone else has done something, has something in their resume. They could earn jury votes. Those two, no dice. That's his one route, and I don't see that route happen.
Yeah, and with Q's threat level peaking, I'll be excited to see how Hunter handles this whole situation, because I think Q is his best shield right now in the game from a personality perspective and the physical side.
I think that will be interesting. I think the development of the 6, which is now 5.
Oh, the 6 is dead in my book. We'll talk about that a lot more.
We'll see. But what we haven't seen once, and maybe we'll get it next week, we haven't seen a Q-Venus conversation.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I bet that's, 2 very different versions of delusional, right? So I think that will be an interesting one to keep an eye out for going forward.
No, that's an interesting point, though, where I feel like Q and Venus are similar in that they get their way in this episode. Q knocks out his target in Tim. Venus knocks out her target in Soda. But despite making the correct move on paper, neither of them leave this week as a more respected contestant by the other players in the game.
No, not. They both come out less respected, I think. It's one of the many parallels in this episode, for sure. But let's go to the challenge. Let's get this over with.
Get this over with. This is your favorite part.
Well, let's break it down. Immunity, reward, yada, yada. The challenge itself is in the vein of some of my favorites. I love an endurance challenge. This one is stand on a wedge-shaped platform on a buoy in the ocean with little toe holds. It's basically like if the whole endurance challenge from 45 that D won, right, was instead of on a pole with altitude, they're on an angle with waves. But there's no waves. because the ocean is calm today, and it is so boring that we get the whole Q alphabet thing. The reward is coffee, sandwiches, danishes, and then more importantly, there's a twist.
Oh,
and yet again, everybody acts surprised that it's going to be split into groups, just like they acted surprised when it was split into groups last week, right?
yeah.
It's maybe they're just being told to act surprised, or when Jeff says there's a twist, maybe they think it won't be in groups.
Oh, I just think there's like one of those applause signs behind the camera that they hold up for the contestants when Jeff says something.
Look surprised. When they look out at the water and they see two colors of buoy, right? They can't be like, whoa, what happened? We're groups again? We just got out of this. Two groups, orange and purple. The two groups, just to run through them real quick, are orange, Tiff, Kenzie, Q, Ben, Hunter, Tim, a.k.a. the Meat Boy group, and purple, Soda, Liz, Maria, Charlie, Venus, Tevin. I'll say this, and I'll give you a little shout out here. The fact that you predicted the eliminations incorrectly, but predicted two people who could go home given these randomly drawn splits was pretty impressive.
Oh, you mean in our group chat when I texted that?
Yeah, because you texted and said Tim and Venus are going home tonight, and the fact that Tim and Venus were on different teams was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I was close there, but that was more so me just reading the edit where I think production knows that this twist is BS, and they don't want a player like a Tevin or a Tiffany going out due to circumstances outside their own control. Like, part of the reason why I think Tim gets under-edited on this season is that if they played him up like this strategic mastermind, the fandom would be furious that he essentially got swap screwed and put into a position where he was outnumbered and there's very little he could actually do. So that's my pro tip for edit reading in the future. When you go into the split tribal, look for the most invisible person, because we saw it in 45. We had Sifu go out, and then the other didn't really follow that rule. The other was Caleb, but Caleb was already a proven threat from the shot in the dark in the week prior.
To break it down really quick, there's a very funny interaction where Tim says, "What's up, Jeff?" And Jeff says, "What's up, Tim?" And Q points out that Tim is asking for the time. But let me throw this out there. Jeff doesn't give him the time until Tim asks again later on. Like, Jeff's like, "Oh, good to know. Thanks, guys." And then doesn't actually give Tim the information. Q goes out first, then Soda, then Ben. Then they go down to 1 foot, and everybody else goes out.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Should we be changing it to a one-footed balance game? I feel like Jeff is just adding rules as he wants to keep the time going quicker.
I think this one was, they'd been out there for a half hour before they got to the one-footed part. This would have been an impressive challenge if it was like the previous time they show. They show a flashback of the last time they ran this endurance challenge. Rough seas. It didn't last 10 minutes. That's a much more interesting challenge, and it was just bad luck, I guess, and that's the challenge they had prepared. So, I don't know, it was kind of luck of the weather is what I would call that, or bad luck of the weather.
I want them to stand on there until one person remains. We've had challenges in the past. Season 10 is a famous one where they have similar poles to 45, but they're out in the water, and the contestants stay there for over 12 hours.
That's awesome.
And I think that's cool. It's a real test of survival. It goes back to the roots of the show. But once you start implementing these little gimmicks of, oh, now balance on 1 foot, and I bet if it went for another 30 minutes, Jeff would be like, now you need to hop up and down on 1 foot. We got to keep this going. We're on a strict timeline. It feels like too much production interference. If you set up the challenge, make it difficult enough so that way it doesn't last that long, or just stick with the rules themselves.
Let me compare it to another endurance challenge. To compare this one to what I think of as the crucifixion challenge from David vs. Goliath.
Of course, yeah.
One of my favorites, right? The iconic Christian where he just won't shut up. Great challenge. There's no stages to that one. It's just get up there and you're up there. And they let it go. This one has stages, right? There are steps built into the challenge. And so I don't think the stand on 1 foot thing was planned to wrap it up. I think it was built in to their preparation, was hey, in case we get to this point, if the seas are calm, this is what we'll do. At least there weren't any knots, right?
That would have made it better. Maybe that was the next stage. At the 1 hour mark, they say, okay, you're all still balancing there with 1 foot. Here's 50 knots. Whoever undoes it first while balancing wins the game. Like, how many random gimmicks are we going to throw into this? So I was not huge on this challenge, but I'm rarely ever big on the challenges to begin with.
Couple things to mention. Tim starts doing shout outs to fill the time, which is hilarious. Kenzie is the last person to go out from purple. It comes down to Tevin versus Maria on orange, and Maria wins out. Maria with what I think of as D-esque stamina and balance. Like, she's standing on 1 foot like D stood on that soccer ball balance thing. Just unmoving.
I thought you were saying like D-tier balance, like low-tier balance. I was like, she won the challenge. That makes more sense. You're comparing her to D. Okay.
Just in that, I mean, it was a very similar stance too, right? But that form of, I mean, it's a form of strength, right? To be able to just hold a position like that for so long. I don't think I could do that for 5 minutes. I would have gotten bored after 10 minutes in this challenge. How long do you think you could have done this one?
Well, with no waves at all, I could have made it to the 30-minute mark, I think. I'd probably lose on the 1 foot component, but I think I could make it to that phase.
In choppy water, I could do well in this challenge.
Oh, okay.
That's my...
Yeah, you want production to bring out like a wave machine of some sort.
Yes. Okay, here's what they do. Jeff starts the aquatic challenges, bring in the boats. At 30 minutes, he goes, bring in the boats, and the boats start doing donuts around the challenge to create chop. That's how you fix this one.
Would that have felt like artificial if you see the boats like going around the challenge to create the waves?
I think it'd be kind of cool, though.
I think it would be cool if they did it behind the cameras so the viewer didn't know. We just thought it got really wavy out of nowhere. And then everyone post-game would probably leak.
Jeff's like, whoa, this is crazy, guys. Where did these waves come from? But so Maria wins. Orange gets the feast, and Orange will get to send somebody to the jury. Purple will send the last nobody home.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. I complained about this last week. Like, the head physical performer in your group should not dictate whether or not you get to sit on the jury, which is one of my biggest issues with this entire twist. Another issue I have with it is that the second group that attends tribal has no knowledge of what happened in the first tribal council.
Right.
Like, don't you think that would be an inherent advantage of, okay, you guys won, or maybe they do it based on the average time rather than the lead person?
I mean, I like that. I think there's a lot of flaws with this, and we could fix it.
But if you do the average time, at least you can say, okay, I didn't get on the jury in part due to my own actions. Like, I contributed to the entire group. Whereas here, it's just like, you're either the best or you're meaningless.
How do you want to do this? Do you want to go through one group completely and then the other?
Yeah, let's run it that way. Who do you want to... Well, do you want to start with the group that is not sending somebody to the jury?
Yeah. Let's start with purple. Q claims he threw the challenge. I don't know if I believe it.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about this because if he threw the challenge, would you revoke his title of Meat Boy? Does that go against the inherent values of being a Meat Boy and not giving your all in every challenge?
No, I'll say this. It shows a level of Meat Boy awareness at this stage in the game to say, look, at the tribal stage, the Meat Boys have to carry. At this stage, Q is trying to mitigate his threat level, and that's a great way to do it. I don't believe he actually threw the challenge, though, because at the interstitial point where Q falls right after a transition, and they basically have a moment where they're allowed to like stretch and readjust before they move up to the next stage. Q takes a very weird position and is like flexing his feet. I think he completely throws himself off so that when he gets to that top level, he's not ready at all. And then he's just covering for it because he doesn't want to admit that he lost another challenge.
And it's against everything else we know about Q from earlier in the season, where he was taking losses so personally in the pre-merge. Yeah. I thought he would be giving 100% in every challenge later in the game.
Like, I'll say this. If Hunter had thrown and said, oh, I was doing this to kind of downplay, I fell in third place, I could have kept going, I would believe that. If he had just been standing and gone, whoa, Q's, just because of what we see in the edit, I don't believe it. We see enough stuff of him being unstable.
It's funny, too, because Q throws this as a way to manage his threat level, yet his actions outside of the challenge are what make other people consider voting him out. Because he's way too flip-floppy and domineering back at camp. They start off with the target on Ben, then he wants to flip it to Tim, then he wants to flip it back to Ben. Q is all over the place, and it seems like no one really respects him that much for it.
Yeah, so let's break down this situation, right? Because we've got I'm sorry, this is orange.
Yeah.
I think I have these mixed up. I think I got the colors mixed up.
Yeah, so it's the orange tribe where we have an interesting split of 3 Yanu, which is absurd because we also had all 3 Yanu on the same tribe last week. They've been getting very lucky in these draws. So you got 3 Yanu, 2 Siga, and Ben and Tim, and then the lone Nami Meat Boy in Hunter. And when I first saw this group, I thought Hunter needed to win the challenge because they have so much incentive to vote out Hunter here. Nami has the numbers advantage from the previous tribal council, and you can probably assume, based on the breakdown of the other group, that Charlie would likely go home if the Nami players stick together. Granted, Soda and Venus need to not tear each other apart for that to happen, but I think it's a fair assumption to say Charlie's the most likely boot since he's the only vulnerable Siga in that opposite group. I thought the obvious decision here was to vote out Hunter, and he's one of the first names that shows up on the board. What do you think was the rationale of the Yanu members in not taking the shot at Hunter right now?
Hunter has enough of an alliance with this majority, with the Yanu, and enough threat level that he can help them in the short term and be cut at 7, right? Hunter is useful for them for a while longer.
So you said Yanu has a connection with Hunter. Who amidst Yanu do you think is the player that is really campaigning? Is Hunter connected with all 3 of them, or do you think it's Q?
The fact that both Q and Tiff have a connection, right? The 6 is a thing here. It quickly falls apart because Tim is clearly unwilling to stick to it. Tim is the reason the 6 isn't a thing. If Tim had put in some work with Maria, we'd be in a very different game, and Tim might not be, on a flight home from Fiji right now. I think there's enough of a bond, not just with Q and Hunter, but with Tiffany and Hunter. What this really comes down to is Q's all over the place. It really is Tiff and Kenzie making the call.
So then with Hunter kind of side-tabled as a potential option, we're left with Ben and Tim. And I want to talk about Tim first here because I think he was put into a terrible position this episode. And no one's really going to complain about that because he was so invisible in the edit. But from Tim's perspective, he wants to keep 2 groups alive. He wants to keep the Siga alliance intact, and he wants to keep the cross-tribal 6 intact so he can really play either one down the line.
Tim's options in this group are anyone else that would get voted out is in one of those 2 groups.
And that's why it's a terrible position for him. I think Tim's ideal swap is one where there is a Nami member that is not in the cross-tribal 6, because the only people he can seriously target are Hunter, who's in the cross-tribal, or Ben, who's in Siga.
Or Kenzie, but they're not going to go for that.
Yeah, it's not even worth proposing that idea.
That's a tricky spot, except for the fact that Tim, from the jump, when they get they go to the old Siga camp, right? And immediately he's like, we got to get Nami. It's all about numbers. It's a tribal game. It's all about numbers. He never thinks about the 6. He never says anything at all. And Q's been testing him on it, right? Tim never talked to Maria. The 6 was never a priority for him because he doesn't seem to have ever had a priority. That was the biggest thing he could have done in the pre-merge game, and he didn't do it.
So do you agree with his decision here to campaign against Hunter, or would he have been better off trying to cut Ben? Because it seems like he never takes the Ben vote very seriously.
He should have been willing to cut Ben because he's talking to people he's supposed to be aligned with and saying, cut members of our alliance when there's somebody who's not would demonstrate at least a willingness to work together in the future. And the fact that Tim is talking to Q primarily, right? We don't really see him talk to Kenzie. I don't think we see him talk to Tiffany. It's really just Q and Tim. I mean, I'll say this. I don't remember Tiffany talking to the others much at all.
Yeah.
And I'll say this. Ben should have gone home.
Oh, 100%. Ben should have went home like 2 episodes ago when when they voted out Jem. Like, Ben, I'm respecting his social game more and more every week because it seems like people genuinely love this guy. He's all about rock and roll, cowabunga, let's have a fun time. And that draws people in.
There's absolutely a jam energy to him, not in that their personalities are similar, but in that somehow their personalities are so lovely that everyone is willing to overlook them.
Yeah,
as a threat. Like, that's really impressive.
The important distinction between Ben and Jam Jam that we haven't really seen yet is that Jam Jam's social play typically translated to strategic agency. Like, because people liked him so much, they drew him into their plans, and then he was able to kind of take over the game with the Tika 3. Yep. Ben seems well-liked, but I haven't seen that actually turn into agency in the game. Like, he's skating by in these votes, but I don't know if we'll reach a point where Ben is the one calling the shots because everybody's feeding him information. With that said, I'm not counting Ben out as a potential winner. I could see him going to the end and winning. He would just need to sit against people that were not the head strategists on the cast. Like, I don't see Ben winning against like a Tevin or a Hunter. He would need to kind of be with some of the other like middle tier players.
Ben could beat like a Q Venus or a Q Charlie.
Yeah. I think Ben's route to victory going forward, there's 2 steps that he has to do. Step 1 is convince Charlie to get rid of Maria. Because once you cut Charlie's number 1 ally, he'll draw Charlie really close to him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
And then I think step 2 for him is be willing to cut Charlie at the very end. Because I worry that if the 2 of them were to go to the end together, that Charlie would come across as the more like strategically savvy player. So all that's to say that Ben was the last pick of our fantasy draft. He was defaulted to me, and I need to thank the rest of you guys for giving me Ben, because now I'm sitting at the final 10 with all 3 of my players still here.
I mean, you're doing real well in fantasy this year. So let me draw this parallel at this stage, because I think we're pretty close to going to the vote.
Yeah.
There's a similarity between the options here where Ben or Tim feels a lot like Soda or Venus. Like, Ben is to Tim a lot like how Soda is to Venus. They're on the same tribe. One is a really strong social player, really well liked. The other is kind of disregarded as a threat at all. The interesting thing is that in one of the votes, the threat goes. The perceived threat goes.
Yeah.
In the other, the disregarded option goes. And I think that in this one, right, where Tim goes home, I wonder how much of it comes down to the conversation that Ben and Q have, where they get all tangled up in potentials and who's writing like feints and who's writing whose name down, and we'll tell him that it's you. But I think what it boils down to is Q pitches Ben on a plan where they fake like they're going to go Ben and they're going to go Tim. That's the blind side. Q says to Ben, are you okay with the potential that if Tim writes your name down and has a successful shot in the dark, you go home?
Oh, like a successful idol. Yeah. A shot in the dark, you lose your vote. Yeah.
There's a chance that there's something that happens and you go home. And Ben says, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. He says, quote, you know what they say in Survivor, no risk, no reward. The classic quote that Jeff says every episode.
It's part of the opening theme. We just don't know it because it's in Fijian. But Jeff, somebody does say that every episode. A lot of the decision comes out of that because the combination of that and the Kenzie-Ben bond, I think, are what keep him around.
It's cool because Ben becomes the person that both of those Yanu members want him to be. Like for Q wants soldiers. He wants contestants that will take orders and follow directions, even when it puts them at risk. And for Q, Ben is willing to do that.
Well, to make it a little more accurate to Q wants linemen.
Yeah, he wants to assemble his team. Meanwhile, Kenzie wants people that she can connect with. She's a hairdresser, and while she does have a strategic mind, I think that social element plays a factor for her. At Tribal Council, she's literally in tears talking about how close she feels with Ben. So even though Ben is a caricature of himself, he's able to like play up different parts of his personality for different people. And I don't know if he's doing that on purpose or if that's just how he is as a guy.
Just to throw out there, Kenzie and Tiffany, as they're having these conversations in Yanu, Kenzie and Tiffany have braided flowers into their hair that stay there until tribal. There's a couple things, actually, that Kenzie does in this episode where she's kept her look very nice. Like she's constantly rebraiding her hair and other people's hair. When we get to tribal, I don't know if you noticed this, but her merge buff is in a bow like she's Minnie Mouse.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of a fresh look. I've never seen somebody do that on Survivor, and she's getting this kind of like princess vibe where everyone else is getting grimier and more disgusting as the weeks go on, and she's like remaining put together. And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see when the tribes come back together how the Ben Yanu dynamic plays out.
Oh, I think Ben will be safe when they come back together, because I think he's forming more and more connections as these episodes go by. I also owe Kenzie an apology, because I think last week I criticized her saying that she wasn't living up to her archetype like Ben was, but it seems like she is living up to the hairdresser side of her, but she's just not explicitly saying it. She does it through her looks.
I think the archetypes, right? Some of them are so much bigger than others. You know, the rock and roll guy has to make everything rock and roll, right? He's got to sound like Guy Fieri, in bloopers as much as possible. Kenzie just has to, be nice and sociable. Should we go to the first tribal?
Yeah, so I don't have a ton from this first tribal. Some notes I wrote down was I got really scared when Ben spoke to Jeff about his experience with the panic attack and they start playing the sad piano music in the background. Like, that was a sign to me that, oh, Ben could actually be going home. This could be his farewell song.
Yeah, I wrote down Ben feels like he's gone with this speech.
Yeah. And
so
it's funny because this is the second time at a tribal council where Ben gives his farewell speech. He did it at the Gem one too, and I wrote down the same thing. Only other highlight I have is when we get another Coach Q moment where he hypes up
unprompted Coach Q.
Yeah.
He just speaks up.
He hypes up his player, Kenzie, for winning immunity. And while I do think he was genuinely happy for Kenzie, I bet one of his fists were like white knuckling in the corner because he wanted that immunity win so bad.
Q did a straight up honorable mention on Survivor. Like, Q's doing our job for us in the episode. Or my job for me on the episode. A couple of other things to note. Tim declares pretty early in Tribal that it's an individual game after he has spent the entire time saying it's about the numbers. We've got to keep Siga strong. And then when Kenzie cries, I did write down, is she doing this to make her eyes bluer?
Yeah, she cries 2 or 3 times in this episode. We get the super blue eyes every time.
Like, she's very emotional about the vote and the potential of losing Ben, I guess. I don't know. It was a nice moment, but I was also like, I know that Kenzie knows her eyes look bluer when she cries. So whenever she cries, I do feel like she's weaponizing it effectively, but I do feel like she is weaponizing it.
That is an interesting theory. Your final vote here, 4 on Tim, 2 on Ben. So Tim is the last pre-merger to miss.
No, 2 on Hunter.
Oh, yeah, 4 on Tim, 2 on Hunter. Thank you for correcting me. Dude, you're doing my job today. Q is taking your job and you're taking mine.
This is the other thing. Hunter does not play his idol. He correctly reads the situation.
Yeah, great read by Hunter. And the most surprising vote here for me was Ben's vote against Hunter. So even though they trusted him enough to keep him in the game, they didn't trust him to the extent where they were willing to rope him in on the plan. Tim's exit, he calls himself the sexiest dad.
So he says that, and then he also says this. I was a leader. I wasn't a loser. You're in your exit interview, my guy, and you didn't lead a single thing. The one opportunity he had to lead, it just drives me nuts when players are not self-aware, right? Like, it's the reason I didn't like Jelinski or Banu. It's Venus's lack of awareness bothers me too. The fact that he's like, I was a leader, and the one opportunity he had to lead was to really push the Meat Boy majority, and he didn't. That just goes all over me when people aren't conscious of their own failings. Like some players, when Soda goes out, her exit interview is touching and heartfelt and genuine and not delusional at all like this. And so those things just bother me, so I do have to point it out.
Yeah. R.I.P. Tim. He doesn't get an epitaph because he's not on the jury. I don't think we'll see Tim play again. He just didn't play a large enough role in the edit to warrant a return. I don't know if I agree with his take that he's the sexiest dad to ever do it on Survivor. Maybe that'll be a series I'll make on TikTok at some point of the top 10.
I think you should make that a series.
Sexiest dads on Survivor. Maybe Tim sneaks into the top 10, but that's a pretty competitive field, I would say.
Yeah, have you heard of Bruce?
Oh,
so let's knock out orange, or
purple. You mean?
Purple. I maybe I'm really colorblind today. Couple of pretty funny things happen here actually, as this negotiation happens, because the Nami majority, which at one point Charlie says the cracks in Nami are more like oceans between continents, which I like.
Yeah,
they basically just hang out for as long as possible and make Charlie and Maria just kind of sit. And especially Charlie, right? Maria's safe. Charlie is in the hot seat here. And eventually he gets to start having conversations. We have a Soda Charlie conversation where Soda's like, let's get rid of Venus. We have a Soda Tevin conversation. And we get another confessional from Tevin where he's like, Soda's got to go. She's this massive threat. We've not been on the same strategic page for ages. I don't think there is anything to this.
I'm kind of the same way. I don't understand why everybody wants to vote out Soda so badly. Like, the Venus targeting makes sense. We have tangible evidence of Venus creating chaos around camp. She's overly aggressive, which we see later when she just throws out Tevin's name for no reason. Like, I understand why the other Nami players want to turn on Venus. But what has Soda done in this game that makes these other contestants not trust her? Like, I go back to my original theory that Tevin wants to be the best social player on the beach. And the fact that there's someone like Soda that can connect with people well, it intimidates him. And it seems like he's one of the head people really gunning for her, not to the same degree as Venus, but to a close level. And I mentioned earlier that Tim got a terrible swap on his tribe. Charlie was the opposite, where he got a very lucky swap here, where even though he's the only Siga member vulnerable, you have the 3 Nami with him that are all against each other. Like, Venus, Soda, and Tevin are a complete chaos.
And Liz is there.
Liz is just there. Side note, as Alexis and I were watching this episode, we were like counting votes and making predictions, and we at one point forgot that Liz was even on the island. We were counting 5 votes in this group, and we forgot to incorporate her.
Liz is entirely willing to do whatever Tevin says.
I think so. I don't know who Liz is more loyal to, if it's Tevin or Hunter. I go back and forth between those two.
Oh, that's a good point. But I think in this situation, the Tevin and Hunter are close, and Liz is tagging along.
Yeah.
Like, it'll be a while before I think we see that break up.
But going back to Charlie, though, I think he also benefits not only in that group of Namis that are there, but the fact that Hunter is not there. Because Hunter is the voice of reason to a degree. I could see a world where if Hunter was in that tribe, he talks Tevin down from taking the shot at Soda and like potentially going for a Siga.
I think the question that this tribal essentially boils down to is there's the easy vote of Charlie, the kind of camp life maintenance vote of getting rid of Venus, and the emptying the shotgun at ghosts vote of getting rid of Soda, right?
Yeah. The Mariah equivalent of the Nami tribe.
Yes. Everybody thinks she's a massive threat. And when she goes home, she bursts out, when she's voted out, she bursts out into tears, doesn't see it coming at all because she wasn't on the same page. I think this is, just like Mariah, a delayed result of the Yanu suckfest. Nami spent so much time alone on the beach, not going to tribal, so many nights just sitting around, that the Soda situation was totally blown out of proportion. Couple other things to note. We get a line from Venus here where first she pulls a Banu and just starts talking to the camera while she's alone, and then goes into an actual confessional and says, sure, playing with fire could bite me in the ass, which I thought was pretty funny because she doesn't say, sure, playing with fire could burn me. She says it could bite me in the ass. And we get this Venus Maria Charlie situation where Venus pushes Tevin to Maria and Maria doesn't have anything to do with it. And then we get the conversation that I think will actually have implications down the line, which is as Charlie is pretending to sleep behind them, right? Charlie's in the back napping and kind of wakes up and is like
staring them
just
down,
peeking at them. We know he's listening, right? Maria tells Venus, look, you're being too aggressive and it makes me not want to work with you. What do you think of this move, right? Because Venus is totally useless, right? And everybody knows she's a snake. Does it do Maria any good to actually tell her she's a snake?
I don't think it's the end of the world for Maria. Like, she knows that Venus's bridges with the Nami players are already burned. So Maria sees Venus as a potential number that she could work with in the long run. This segment with Venus, though, was damning for her long-term winning potential. I don't see a world where Venus wins the game now. Because going into the merge, I knew she wasn't going to work with the Nami players. Like, there was just no chance of that happening. But there was hope that she could make this flip to one of the other two groups and gain power from there.
She said that's what she wanted to do, right?
And now those other contestants don't even trust her. So
let me throw this out there. This episode, she's burned her bridges with Siga, right? The remaining Siga players won't have anything to do with her. Maria's done with her. Venus is going to be like, screw you. I've got power in this game. I'm going to play with fire. I think next week could be when we see Venus trying to get in with Yanu because she hasn't done that yet.
Yeah, she needs to complete her Infinity Gauntlet of failed relationships. She already has the Nami one and the Siga one.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted.
But I was just saying that I think Venus is headed towards zero vote finalist territory. I think there's going to be a world where she makes it to the end and attempts to take credit for some of these moves that on paper are good for her resume. Like, Venus should be targeting Soda here because the two of them don't have a working relationship. But when you are so poor socially and you position yourself as the second option on the table, it makes that less meaningful. And I think her social game is poor enough to the point where who does she beat in the end? She potentially beats Liz with the underdog story. I would wonder if Liz beats her.
Anybody beats Liz.
That's an interesting question of if Liz could beat Venus.
Because here's the thing. We now know everybody who will be on the jury or sitting next to them. And there's enough people there who know Liz is a millionaire who doesn't need the money.
Okay.
Right? So if Tevin's on that jury, he's going to bring it up. Right? Like, there's no way Liz ever wins this game. We know that.
That's fair. But to bring it all back to Maria, the edit portrays Maria as the voice of reason on this cast. Like, how often do we see a confessional from Maria where she's giving, like, a strategic misread? She talks about her relationship with Tim in a way that makes Tim look like a bad player. And the fact that Maria is the one that kind of downplays Venus's game makes me believe that Venus is kind of dead in the water. And it's frustrating, too, making content for this show because the Survivor fandom loves Venus. She's the new Carolyn to them. And like,
well, yeah, she's messy.
She is messy, and I think she's entertaining, but we also need to be realistic in terms of you can be fun TV, but also not great at the game of Survivor.
I don't think she's entertaining, right? She's wanting to be entertaining. I think a lot of Carolyn's entertainment in her kookiness was that she was unabashedly herself, and that self was a little out there. Venus wants to be the shit stirrer. She wants to play with fire. She wants to, we see a tribal. She calls her shot. She's like, everyone's going to blindside me, and is wrong. Where Carolyn's messiness worked out really well for her, Venus is just, everyone knows she's a snake, and she's too much of a snake to get anybody to work with her.
She's successful in that sense, though, where she wants to be perceived as this villain on the cast, and the other contestants see her as a villain.
Like, I guess, like, if she's just angling to come back and play a hero's villains in, like, season 57.
That might be her goal. I don't know. But I don't know. It's just frustrating at points because maybe this is a sign that I need to just, like, go outside and smell some grass.
Especially because the phrase is touch grass, not smell grass.
Oh, yep. That's probably a sign, too. But, like, every season we get one of these contestants that's, it really varies, but typically it's on the bottom that has a very, like, cool personality that draw people in. and then everyone thinks that they're automatically a great player. Like, I still get comments now saying that Carolyn should have beaten Jam Jam in the final tribal, which just isn't true. And
it's just ridiculous.
I'm mentally preparing myself for Venus to lose in the end and then get 50 million comments about how Venus should have won and how she was robbed.
Well, so let's go to tribal, because I think Venus is going to try to take credit for this.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And so let's get into that, because there's not much to cover here, really. Liz is like, oh, Nami's strong. I didn't even bring my bag. I think she didn't bring it because she couldn't find it, but she's saying she brought it out of confidence. You know, she's a marketing specialist. She knows how to sell something.
She can buy a new bag.
And we get the vote. Blindside. I don't have any notes other than the fact that all I have is Liz didn't bring her bag, and Venus says everyone's going to blindside.
Yeah, those are the only things I have. So your final vote here is 4 on Soda, 2 on Venus. The 2 players that vote against Venus are Soda herself, which makes sense, and the other one is Tevin for some reason. Like, Tevin was one of the players gunning for Soda more than anyone else, yet he doesn't vote against her, which sucks because now I lost fantasy points from Tevin by voting incorrectly.
I wonder if this was a safety in case Soda wised up and shot in the dark.
I think so too.
Like, I think Tevin was doing the numbers. I don't think it was an oblivious play. As Soda leaves, I got to be honest, I didn't even write it down. Venus is acting smug.
Yeah.
Like, Venus is acting like she did this.
Soda asks her, was it you? And Venus says yes. She takes full credit for the move. And it's only a matter of time until other people go to the jury and tell Soda that it wasn't actually Venus.
It'd be wild if we get to a final tribal where Venus makes that claim and someone has to refute it at final tribal.
No, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Because when Venus makes that comment, Tevin puts his head down and says no. Like, Tevin knows that he was actually the person pushing the vote.
I'm on the fandom side. Venus is great. She's messy. Maybe she is a great player. She deserves to win.
No, she's great TV. I think she adds a lot of spice to the cast, and I have a fun time like seeing her on TV, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's good at the game, right? You want my epitaph for Soda?
I do. Soda walks out crying. Tim cries too, should be noted. But Soda cries instantly because this blindside was comprehensive.
She's crying because she knows the epitaph is on its way. It is R.I.P. Soda. It looks like this camp song has drawn to a close.
Not bad. Not bad.
I thought about making some kind of Soda joke, but I couldn't think of a good one. Like, I went through a whole bunch of different ones of, like, the soda can getting clogged in the machine, like the vending machine somehow, but I couldn't make it work. So I just went back to the camp song anecdote.
I like it. I like it. You know, it's the first one of the season, so got a lot more to look forward to.
Yeah, we build up from here. Actually, I threw it. I threw the epitaph like Q through the challenge. That way my future ones will sound so much better.
You're absolutely saying that because I didn't fall out of my chair laughing at that one. But I like it. I think I would have gone with something about Soda falling flat because, you know, Soda can go flat.
Yeah, that was another one I had too. Will we see Soda play again?
I think there's a chance because I think she's very likable. Soda could come back into the game, could play a new season, and nobody knows anything about her except that she's nice.
And that her and Venus hate each other.
Even that, I never perceived as Soda disliking Venus as much as being like, stop gunning for me. We're on the same tribe. Like, yes, you're not my first ally, but I don't think there's a ton of bad blood going from Soda to Venus as much as it is frustration with the bad blood coming the other way. I don't know. I think I could see her coming back because it's pretty impressive in a strange way, to be the mayor of Ponderosa without a single strategic move to your resume and without any move to your resume. Soda hasn't done anything.
She contributed to the Mariah vote. She voted correctly there, but like so did everybody else.
Yeah.
I'll say that I'd put Soda at number 3 right now in chances of returning. So Soda's at number 3, number 2 is Jem, and number 1 is the fan favorite, the king of the 46 pre-merge, Banu, is still at the top of the list.
Oh, man. I mean, I hope you're wrong. I would love to see Soda come back.
The take here is that Soda returns if Venus comes back. I think production is going to be a super villain and bring both of them together on the same tribe.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I would love to see them come back and have a secret alliance.
I doubt it. I think they come back and do the exact same thing.
So, well, I guess we'll find out. Other thing to note here, Charlie does not shot in the dark. He is confident enough in the vote that even though he holds his shot in the dark up, he does not play it. Yet another parallel here, right? Both Hunter and Charlie have things they could use. They are both the easy vote, and they both correctly read it and do not play. So there's really a lot of little facets to both of these votes that felt really similar. I think they're both 4-2 as well.
Yeah,
they are both 4-2.
So, want to go to winners and losers?
Yeah, let's knock those out. Who is your winner?
Winner goes to Hunter. I was going back and forth between Hunter and Charlie because they were in similar spots where they were outnumbered and they had to overcome the Siga Nami dynamic to survive until the next round. But I think Hunter's survival is more impressive in that the Nami group that Charlie attends tribal council with is already in shambles. Like, I don't think he was really responsible for those players turning on each other. Like, Venus and Soda wanted to knock each other out before they even met Charlie.
Right.
Whereas I think Hunter's survival is more of a result of his work that he put in with the Yanu contestants, and he didn't play his idol, which he'll get to use later on, whereas Charlie preserved a shot in the dark, which is just less valuable. So, yeah, I really like Hunter's game right now. I'm still worried about his threat level management with the physicality, but I think he's one of the legit contenders to win. I'll be making a video later this week on my tier list of most likely to win the season, and at the top I have Hunter and Kenzie.
I mean, I think that's a totally fair read. My winner, and I think you might find this one contentious, I'm giving mine to Tiffany.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Venus.
Oh, no, not that contentious. I love Tiffany's position right now in the game. She's tight with Kenzie. She's tight with Q and willing to drop him, right? Kenzie has a ton of stuff going on. Q has a ton of connections. But when push comes to shove, she will be willing to drop the liability that is Q. I think the biggest question in Tiffany's game is, can she drop Kenzie before Kenzie drops her? That will be the test. But I really like the Kenzie-Tiffany dynamic, their positioning. And the reason I gave it to Tiffany over Kenzie is that I think Tiffany has a stronger line to Tevin and Hunter, where Kenzie has a stronger line to Ben. And so I think that was my split between those two. It was down to Kenzie or Tiffany for me, but I like their positioning a lot.
So you mentioned that you like that Tiffany is willing to cut Q. Do you want her to cut Q in the near future, or do you think it's better for her to keep him around, just keep a couple more votes? Okay.
Oh, totally keep him around. I think unless he makes a fool of himself, which, let's be honest, is kind of likely. Like, if he starts coaching too loud and getting too rowdy, like he kind of did in this one, then yeah, cut him. But otherwise, he's a great shield. Cut a Meat Boy, keeping a Meat Boy around until Final 7, Final 6. Ooh, great.
Yeah, Final 7, I agree. Final 6 is where I get a little bit scared, because then you're 2 immunities away.
And then he's going to throw that one too.
Losers. I got Q as my loser.
Same.
Okay, great. I think we've been on the same page a lot this season in terms of the losers. We go back and forth.
Losers feel very clear this season.
Yeah, because last week we both had Venus. The week before we both had Mariah. This is our third week of consensus loser. But even though I think Q made the right move in throwing the challenge to mitigate his threat level, I just think he's losing allies. And my prediction for next week's elimination is Q. I think the edit is starting to leave those seeds to explain why Q eventually goes home.
The next time on looked real messy. I will say that. And when things get messy, somebody like Q does not do well.
Yeah.
Right? Q is very hard on his sleeve. He does not play a steady game. We saw that in this episode. And when things are messy, that's the kind of gameplay that falls off the wagon.
Yeah,
that doesn't really
off the
make
rails,
sense, but that's okay.
But I also think he makes a weird decision in voting out Tim, because he originally wanted to eliminate Ben to preserve the cross-tribal 6. And then once Tim expresses any hesitation with that cross-tribal alliance, Q says, okay, if you're hesitant, I'm going to tear the whole thing down.
Let me throw this out. That willingness was established last week.
Okay.
Q said last week when he found out that Maria didn't know, he's like, I'm willing to cut Tim out of this, right? For Q, having the bond with Hunter and Tevin is not predicated on having the bond with Maria and Tim.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be 6. It can be 4, and he's willing to cut those 2 if they're not willing to actually be a part of it.
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying that the optimal move would have been to knock out Ben over Tim. Because what is Ben bringing to the table for Q's game? At least with Tim, there's the potential for an alliance down the line, but I don't think he has a working relationship with Ben. Maybe he just likes the surfer bro persona, because the two of them are the biggest archetypes on the cast in terms of the coach and the rock and roll artist.
Well, and I think that the willingness Q has to settle a score, eliminating Tim, is getting rid of a potential ally who did not follow through. That's cleanup, not proactive play in a way. And I think that's also something that won't fare well for him down the line.
Who's your honorable?
My honorable mention goes to Maria. Just because I'm like, it's a combination of things, right? She won a challenge. I love an underdog challenge winner. When you have a challenge like this where it's endurance, it's balance, and she was so rock solid in that, I can't not give props to her. And then you couple that with the kind of mom vibes of being unwilling to take any shit from Venus. That's great. And then you add on top of that, Charlie doesn't seem willing to aqua dump without her permission.
Yeah.
Like she's in a great spot, and not episode winner condition, but honorable mention for sure.
I wish Maria really stepped up to the plate when Venus and Soda were arguing. I wish she was like, Venus, you go in that corner. Soda, you go in the other. You're both in timeout now. No arguing on my beach.
That would be great. You're grounded. No challenges for a week.
Oh, if she said that to Soda when Soda went home, just yelled, you're grounded. My dishonorable should not be a surprise. It's Venus. I would be shocked if she won the season at this point. I think it's more likely that she gets 0 votes at the end than anything else, which is a shame for Liz, because I know Liz was really hoping for that prime spot of 0 vote finalist, but I think it's trending in the direction of Venus.
It is one of my favorite aspects of Survivor that the win equity and final potential are completely different, right? The fact that those two lists can exist in parallel without being really related in a way is so interesting to me.
Yeah, well, I also think the edit went out of its way this week to explain to the viewer why this was not Venus's move on her resume. Because if they wanted to, They could have presented this as, look at Venus taking out her biggest threat in the game. And instead they present it more as the decision by the other 4 players on that tribe.
It'll be interesting to see if that strengthens Maria or Tevin or Charlie more, because we know it doesn't strengthen Liz.
Oh, well, for it to strengthen Liz, she would need to be on screen. That's everything I have. Anything else in your notes?
The end game begins next week. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think Final 10 will be a very telling episode in terms of who takes control. Because right now, what's the split amidst tribes? I think it's 3 Siga, 3 Yanu, and
4 Nami.
3 Nami with Venus on the outside of that group. It's like 3, 3, and 3, and 1 free agent.
And 1. 3, 3, 3, and a free agent nobody wants. Well, tune in next week, and we'll get into the end game.